A bunch of new crazy artwork just dropped showing old god eyes in laboratories, in containers, a brain with a gigantic sword through it, and a whole bunch of other Nerubian old god experiments. When we combine this with the gigantic purple tentacle from the official cinematic, it is now certain Xal'atath is extracting the black blood from these remains. The real question though is, how is she even getting the old god parts in Khaz'algar, and we don't know any old god that was pierced with this type of a sword directly through the brain. Are we looking at the 5th undiscovered old god? Interestingly enough, the number of eyes in the lab seems to match the actual mural, and this sword might reveal what actually happened to him. Is this from the time of the Titans or something else? Let's examine all the new info, and where is Xal'atath getting this from, and what is she planning to do with the old god remains? Did you know you can play the War Within directly on your phone with Awesome, this video's sponsor? You can control your desktop from your phone completely free, which is perfect when you don't really want to sit at the computer. Super easy to use, just use my link, download the PC and the phone app, and just connect them. The free version is great, you can control your desktop, but the real deal is the game version with custom keyboards for various games such as WoW, with great FPS and sound. Make sure to use my code DORON to get 7 days completely free so you can try it out, only for the first 200 people. They also got a smart lock to turn off your PC at any time, as well as hot sales with up to 40% off on Pro and Game versions. Check out Awesome. I've already talked about this when the first War Within cinematic came out, and this was a little detail that not a lot of people have actually been talking about, or even at all. You can check it out for yourself, but we have a shot showing a Nerubian in some sort of an intricate dark laboratory with a gigantic tentacle and black blood in vials that they seem to be gathering. Seeing that out of all the scenes they could do, they decided to do this, it's obviously going to be a big deal as we go forward in the War Within. We are dealing with the black blood, it's definitely going to be one of the most important parts of the expansion and Xal'atath's ultimate goal. My initial reaction was that they were trying to build a new body for Xal'atath because, as you may know, Xal'atath doesn't actually have her own native body. As far as we know, she's some dark, mysterious void figure, older than the old gods, and she's currently appearing as a void elf that she possessed back in BFA, but her true form is something much more sinister than what she actually looks like. We know she doesn't seem to like the old gods, and as Blizzard confirmed in an interview, she isn't exactly trying to revive the old Black Empire, but to create a new one, so it did make sense that she would combine all the parts of the failed Void Servants in order to create a mega one for herself. However, then we got more information that made this entire thing more interesting. Most interestingly, a few weeks back, we had the senior visual development artist dropping a ton of new artwork of azj'kahet, with not only showing us new shots of this process in the laboratory, but also giving us hints as to what they are actually doing. Before we analyze the artwork itself and what the actual meaning of this is, I just want to state that it is 100% clear that Xal'atath is not an old god, but is actually tied to them. As you may have heard in the latest Confronting Xal'atath cinematic, she lured us to fight the Nerubians to fuel the black blood of the old gods, which she said is her power. I just want to state that you need to drop whatever preconceived notion you have on what blood means, because old gods are not mortal, they're not beings that live in a similar way. Blizzard even told us they can't really die in the way that we do, and they definitely don't go to the Shadowlands. We've seen the heart of Y'Shaarj being incredibly potent hundreds of thousands of years after he died. In fact, we've seen time and time again that old god blood is literally dark magic, and it does some crazy things. For example, Seronite is the blood of yogg-saron that is spilling all over Northrend. It has this strange hue that is unlike any other old god, and it is known to have mind-consuming properties, as it can literally drive you insane. Icecrown Citadel itself was built from Seronite. Originally, Blizzard actually intended to make a connection on how yogg-saron completely corrupted Arthas, but then they ended up dropping that. Remember, Seronite is how the Emerald Nightmare originated when a World Tree was planted over a huge pool of it. Remember this fact, as I feel like they're doing the exact same thing again in Khaz'algar, just different World Tree, different old god, and a different island or continent. Second old god blood that we've seen is from Y'Shaarj, the supposed supposedly most powerful one, and the fact that his blood spilled over Pandaria created a permanent issue that can't be removed, creating the so-called Shah. Shah that get empowered by conflict, which is incredibly similar to what Xal'atath just told us that she's doing with her artifact and how she is empowering the black blood. The only blood we have not seen yet in this manner is from Khaz'algar and Azj'kahet that should both be dead by now. What is really interesting to note is the fact that we've learned from the game itself now, and that is that apparently there is a large collection of collective old god blood in the very foundations of Azeroth. This makes sense when you think about it. Y'Shaarj was pulled out where the Well of Eternity was, and as he was removed, his blood spilled over the southern part of Kalimdor on the actual surface. Now, imagine that since the old gods are like half buried under the ground anyway, and later they were imprisoned deep in the ground, the entire earth would be soaked by this substance. It's much worse below the ground than on the ground level. As you can see, Serenite is literally all over Northrend, so this fact does make complete sense. There seems to be a large deposit of old god blood all over the deep places of the earth. This in fact might even be what Deathwing figured out as well, and what really corrupted him. Now, it was said that the old god blood was already over Khaz'algar, but when Sargeras stabbed Azeroth at the end of Legion, and very likely Khaz'algar, this made it incredibly potent and activated it in a way. We don't really know what this means, whether the sword going through Khaz'algar just created a mess with this collective pool of old god blood and just did this giant infusion of new blood, or whether this gigantic strike, this planet-sized conflict, further empowered the blood that was already there. However, as we can see, old god blood is all over Khaz'algar. This now brings us to something incredibly interesting and a little bit conflicting. We can see that the blood is underground, but from the game and the artwork in the cinematic, we can see that the Nerubians are not exactly collecting this blood with containers, but they seem to be extracting it from old god parts. An insane number of old god parts they're storing in their pretty advanced laboratories. This brings the question, whose parts are these? Why are they doing this? And what is the ultimate goal? Now, just so that you don't think I'm speculating around over here, this is what the Blizzard artist wrote in the description of this collection of artwork. Fallen old god remains are experimented with and are stored in deep chambers. Their blood harbors interesting properties. In the first bit of artwork, we can see a whole bunch of old god eyes kept in some sort of a container, smaller and larger ones, and as you may remember, old gods are known to have a ton of eyes. Then we got this weird funnel type thing that seems to have some sort of a brain matter in there. The second artwork shows a whole bunch of containers and lab equipment, and in my opinion, I think this is where they're mixing up the old god blood. It's like a crazy old god blood extraction factory. After that, we can literally see a tentacle and what appears to be like a lab centrifuge mixing this blood. Later, we got these strange eggs, which I think are the Nerubians being empowered by it. However, it then starts taking a little bit of a weirder turn. There seem to be some sort of trees or mushrooms that might have grown from this. Then, it gets really crazy. So, we got what appears to be a gigantic brain structure in two versions. One smaller, one much larger. However, what makes this one in particular really interesting is the fact that there is a gigantic spider over it, and even more interestingly, there seems to be a gigantic sword lodged all the way to this supposed brain matter. Now, what could this possibly be? Some people are saying this could be an Azj'kahet, as we did stab him, but this sword seems gigantic. It seems to go all the way through. It definitely does seem like an old god brain, and it is kind of similar to yogg-saron from Wrath. On the other hand, obviously it isn't a sword of Sargeras. Now, to make matters even more confusing, the creature that we can see is apparently called the Great Devourer, and he seems to be on top of this thing, doing something. If the name suggests anything, he seems to be devouring this matter, which doesn't really make too much sense. Why would they want to devour the old god brains? Now, when they say old god remains, they may be referring to old god armies or old god servant, not just the old gods themselves. But I gotta say, based on the size of these body parts as well as the gigantic tentacle we can see in the cinematic, these really do seem to be the old gods. The real question though is, how did they even bring the old god parts all the way to Khaz'algar, and why to Khaz'algar out of all the places? One of the explanations could could be the Nerubian tunnels. Apparently Northern is connected to Khaz'algar, if you didn't know, and King Anubarak, for example, could technically reach Khaz'algar before they seal the place, so they could bring like yogg-saron all the way through the tunnel if it's in place. However, I somehow feel like all of this may be related to the 5th undiscovered old god. Sure, the collective blood is there, but there are heavy hints that the 5th old god actually lived in the place where Khaz'algar is, and that is where they are getting all these parts from. Some people said the tentacles was that of Xal'atath due to the purple color, but this guy we had seen in the mural in azj'kahet is also purple, and is sort of like a mix between yogg-saron and Xal'atath. What I find incredibly interesting is that there seems to be a similar number of eyes, if you don't look at these two little ones, even if I don't even know if they're eyes, in those vials, and when you compare it to the mural, it also has a large one in the middle, just like in the lab. If these body parts are of this guy, then this makes it so much more interesting. What is this sword? Is this how the 5th old god was defeated? It's very likely that the 5th old god might have been defeated by the Titans or Titan servants, and this might literally be like a Titan keeper sword, like they might have killed an old god that we never knew about. It's large, but it's also not the sword of Sargeras, and this might literally be an old god brain. Now, based on all the recent lore, I do feel like they're really taking the old god blood, not to reform the old gods, and it doesn't seem like we're going to be seeing the old gods return. It appears Xal'atath is aware how potent their blood is, and she's trying to harvest it for its magical properties and to channel it in some way, likely to the Dark Heart artifact if it wasn't fully destroyed. This is also what she really meant with my power, not that the blood itself is her own or of her kin, but that she's using the dark blood as her new power. Now, we did defeat the Nerubians really quickly, and now in the next match we seem to be going to a new island to discover another crystal just like Peladar, which is apparently a classification of the World Soul's essence. You can check all that out in the previous video I made. However, I feel like so much more is hidden below, and that when we discover the Haranir and the Rootlands, we're going to see that the old god blood is far more powerful, and they might have finished whatever they're doing with the extraction. I feel like all these vials, containers, and whatnot are going to be taken somewhere and used for something, and this might just be what is going to bring WoW Midnight, or the ultimate conversion of Peladar into a permanent void crystal, which could trigger Midnight. Thank you for watching. Check out my video on major characters we might lose in the World Soul Saga by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on Perun and Slavic mythology by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time!